G'day to you. This is the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. My name is Tony Ballinger, and my guest today is Hudson Chalmers. He spoke in a previous episode, number 89, which is worth going back to listening to. And today he's going to continue on from that talk and give us another view of his times and experiences in Rhodesia. So, Hudson, welcome. We've just chatted about the weather. You're in Cape Town. Here in a very sunny England today, which is beautiful. So good morning to you. And where can we begin from?
Morning, Tony. Where do you want to start? Where I went to school? Anything like that?
Well, actually, in your last talk, you mentioned that you mentioned where you went to school. You mentioned that you got into mining and then surveying, and then that progressed into some experiences in the military or quasi-military, whatever you want to call it. And
yeah.
Particularly PSYOPs, which is interesting. Not many people know about that unit. So maybe just in the next 5 minutes, give us a brief overview from school to the part where you started getting involved in things military-wise. Perhaps, that's an idea.
Yeah, okay. Initially I went into the post office college electronics. I was found to be partially colorblind after school at Milton, and went overseas briefly. Didn't enjoy the weather, came back and joined the mines. My father was in the mining business. Started as a learner mine official, which was a 2-year course with the mine manager, Fred Adams, one of those incredible men, ex-Marine during the war. Real bushman as well. He walked all the way from Gatuma, as it was, to Zambezi Valley, all the way through to Mozambique, just with a backpack and himself. It's the sort of man he was. So a real influence on my life and a great man. So mining was my career. I ended up as mine manager, general manager, ultimately, and eventually having my own mine, which is perhaps another story. But I was exempt from military service due to my college time and my learner official. And of course, Fred Adams was as I found out later, he was the chairman of the exemption board. So he wanted to keep me on the mine. And he said, your time will come, which in fact it did. So I did a lot of work in the operational area, and I felt I needed to get more involved. I knew a guy called Simon. I don't know if you've never heard of him. He was the guy that ran the computer section for call-ups. So I got hold of him and I said, okay, I now want to join the army. He said, no, you're too old. 30 years old is too old. So he said, I can get you into the GSU, General Service Unit in the police. So I volunteered, went in there, 6 weeks training at Tomlinson Depot. I had my medical at KG6, interestingly, and I got A-1 vision. And they ignored the rheumatic fever, and I didn't tell them, obviously. Initially, it was very interesting. We were deployed to places like Rushinga. What's that other place that John hated as well? Not far from there. Anyway, I'll remember it. And we went on stop groups. We did patrolling. We did some OPs. And then they took us and they stuck us down at Rhodesia. That was a horrible experience. Walking up and down that rail track, 2 of you, prime target, with a radio that seldom worked, batteries always flat. And what were we going to do, really?
Yeah.
The only exciting part of it really was when the terrorists had to go at the rail line at a tanker that was actually parked at Rhodesia. They missed the bar zone, hit the rail. And then the RAR guy came, can't remember the lieutenant's name, a young guy. And there was also RHU guys there, and we were put on stop groups. And he was very wise, that young lieutenant. He took his bayonet and punctured all the water bottles of the RHU guys. They had French letters with brandy in them, and then poured them out. Anyway, that was an interesting experience. We never saw anything or heard anything of that. Whether they caught those terrorists, we don't know. So that was about the most exciting thing there. And I got home and I got hold of Simon. I said, I can't do this anymore. It's just not on. And so he said, okay, I can get you into PSYOPs, Psychological Operations Unit. That's at the old Cranbourne Barracks. So I was sent there. I met the CO at the time, Captain Dalton. I think he became a major later on or something. Later, yeah, quite a good guy. And got a bit of a briefing, and then I was sent to 5RR Jock at Sonoya.
Before you progress from that point, Hudson, could you tell the audience what the purpose of the PSYOPs unit was, what its aims and objectives were, manpower, training, etc.? Because, it's something that very few of us have heard about.
Okay, it was, they did all the leaflet drops and the pamphlets and that sort of thing, which I was not involved on. I think when I joined, there was only about 100 of us. Ultimately, then there was 800 volunteers from the black community, some of whom I helped train. But our involvement as riflemen, that's what we were called riflemen, was to work with certain battalions around the country. So we'd go and patrol with them. We'd also go and patrol with INTAF. That was quite a unique experience. Because the INTAF guys at that time were sent out with 303s on a flatbed Bedford truck. And I was tasked to go with them. And with the TR-48, the battery failed like on the first time I switched it on. And so I had my FN, and there was 6 of these INTAF guys, really incredible guys, just to try and get intel. I think we got some useful information that we used to take back. Stan Fines Clinton was the, what do you call him, the head honcho there on internal affairs at the time.
I think other objectives and things that PSYOPs did was they did sky shout from loudspeakers in.
No, I wasn't. We did, as I say, Charles getting in from talking to people in the villages.
Yeah.
With 5RR, depending on what company was in there.
I'm just sort of giving an overview of what the unit was also tasked with. It was a sky shout. They also did sort of psychological stuff, PSYOPs, what do you want to call it, propaganda, helping to the other guy interviewed, but we never published his video because he asked us to withdraw it. Did work helping to teach locals, which was a way of boosting their support for us.
Yeah, we one exercise I was on, I didn't actually see the line. We had to take a white line into the communal land, or TTL as it was called at the time. Apparently that had some sort of spiritual significance. I wasn't involved in that, but I saw pictures of it. Quite frankly, I don't think PSYOPs was very effective at all. That's my personal opinion. We were more effective is when we were actually helping on the ground. We did body shows, which was a bit gruesome. So we'd have a saber, RHU guys, and any of the terrorists that had been killed from that particular village, we'd load them on the front of on the bonnet and then drive into the village and show the people what it was. We also had the unfortunate experience of also seeing the results of the terrorists' actions in the villages against their own people. It was just engendered quite a strong hatred in my heart anyway, which has never left me, I must say. And then it sort of, eventually we didn't even report to Cranbourne. I just reported straight to 5RR in Sonoya. And I was fortunate to be under the command of Lieutenant Darrell Benzel. What a man. He was just incredible. One of those people in life that really impacts. He'd send me out on patrols with some of the guys from 5RR, but he was very shy. And we had the ladies from, I forget what they were called, WVS or something, and were all coming to visit, and he was supposed to take them to lunch at the Orange Grove Motel. So he called me in and he said, Hudson, he was very informal. They're the epaulets. and there's my cap and there's my stable belt. You are going to go and entertain these ladies for lunch at the Orange Grove Motel. So I said, yes, sir. What else could I say? So I went and met them at the hotel, took them to lunch, entertained them. It was actually very interesting how much they actually do for the troopies, etc. And of course, I was soundly mocked when I got back to base camp, and I insisted the guys salute me, which they didn't, of course. So that's a sort of relationship that TF that we had with what you call the brass. I mean, it was pretty informal. Bearing in mind that a lot of us knew each other business-wise as well during the war. We had who was Jackie Dupree. I was on patrol with him once, the cricketer, Rhodesian cricketer. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And the Fulton brothers, they owned the sports shop. They were twins, actually.
Oh, Fultons, yes, yes.
Yes, so the twins, they looked at, you couldn't tell them apart. And if the one didn't feel like going on a call-up, he'd send his brother. And now he knew the difference. And then, of course, I knew Martin Kramer. Although he's, in my case, we deployed to Sonoy, but it would be different companies for 5RR. We wouldn't always be matching at the same time. Another exercise which was quite interesting was he sent me with another guy, just two of us, on OPs, observing the farms. This might upset some guys, but nevertheless, I'll tell the story. As you're aware that the fencing was paid for by the government, the agri-alert was paid for, and the idea was to protect the families and the farmers. And so Colonel Vinzaro was quite concerned about what he observed, what heard. So he sent me out on OPs on about, I think it was about 10 farms in the Mangula area. And it was quite a eye-opener for me. We'd obviously be very well concealed. And we'd see guys come from the club, 6 o'clock at night, flashing their lights, and their kid would come up in the gate.
Good Lord.
And I had to make notes of those. We didn't have photographs, obviously. So I made notes of those and the timing and what have you. And I reported that all back to the colonel, and he called a meeting at the Mangura Country Club. And he had me sitting there as well, which didn't make me feel too happy. I'd been in the firing line. And he related these incidents, and some of the guys got very angry. But it showed who was actually not following the rules.
Mm.
And he pointed this out very clearly and very kindly, that, really, it's not only your own lives, but every time there's an incident because of you, then I've got to send my guys out at risk. So he was not happy with him, and he was very, very stern, but very kind.
Mm.
That's the sort of man he was. Apart from that, the other excitements we had, maybe there was an HDF again at Mangura. I think it was about 1979. And I think it just scared all the terrorists out of the way, and nothing happened. And every now and again there'd be a scare, and then we'd be put on the trucks and sent off to Karoi or wherever required. Nothing much ever came of it. Mostly OPs. Those were quite exciting. We had to call in fire force a couple of times. In our sort of age group, we were told not to engage if we saw more than sort of 2 or 3 terrorists, which I think was wise. And we tended to be cautious as well, being more mature,
Mm.
So,
are you able to describe one of those fire forces? They're quite impressive to watch from an OP, aren't they?
it's amazing, absolutely amazing. We saw, I'm just trying to think where it was. Do you know Mount Thackeray in Mount Darwin, just to the west of the base there? Yeah. There was a relay station there. And we were actually on OP there, and we saw these terrorists moving as a group of about 10, 15. So we called in, obviously had damn good comms because we were right near the relay station there. And then the first came in the 2 choppers, the K car and the G car, started dropping the guys. And we could see this movement. It was just incredible, and the excitement. And then what was it? Pull me aircraft?
Lynx,
yeah, Lynx dropping napalm, and no, we called it Frentan. Napalm was illegal.
It was. It's the Rhodesian version of the Vietnamese napalm. Yes.
At front end, and then of course the gunners with a 20mm when they, I mean, that was just so awesome, and how those guys were taking fire. I mean, it was so gripping, and we just used to think about those guys as the Blue Boys and the RLI guys, and your heart just went to them. You know what I mean? You couldn't help them instead of watch it.
Mm.
But their professionalism was just incredible, absolutely incredible.
Mm.
And of course, then there were stock groups, and the action often would last up to an hour and a half. Pretty exhausting.
Mm.
So I had that privilege of seeing that and meeting a lot of the guys, especially that come through the jock at Sonoya. And
that late in the war, the tourists were getting pretty shifty as well. They were mounting guns halfway up a hill.
Oh, look,
and when the choppers came in, they were getting nailed big time.
Came under intense fire. But in 1979, things were really getting very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the guys that I knew in 5th Bat had left. I think Martin had left already. So now we were getting new entries. And then I was put onto the training troop with Captain Bob Lyons. Ferocious fellow. You don't want to cross him. But very nice guy. Very nice guy. And we used to go to Nkoma. What do they call it then? Nkoma? Can't remember.
Nkoma, yeah.
Nkoma, that's where we'd base. And then they were calling the guys up that had managed, let's say, dodged the draft, but hadn't been called up, and raking the officers. And we'd give them a 6-week course, which was pretty rugged for them. The fat guys would come out skinny, and the skinny guys would come out robust. The wives wouldn't recognize them. And Bob was tough. I mean, he was quite adamant. His job was to make sure that the people who came through survived and could do a job. And he said, it's stupid that gets you killed. So you're not going to be trained to be stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very, very, very strict and realistic. The one occasion gave me a hangover fright as well. In the RL, I only used the old one, the old RL. They couldn't risk the other thing. We instructed the driver you must have the windows down for obvious reasons. If you're going to an ambush area, sometimes you debus, and then the troopies must be on the lee side or the safe side of the potential, and not move in front of the truck. So this driver was very nervous, and I was sitting next to him, and I knew what was coming. And what Bob does, as I get to a certain position, he puts a slug right through the window in front of the guy, and the guy just panics and stalls. That's exactly what he wasn't supposed to do. He got hell from Bob, believe me. He never did that ever again. And then we'd do a 37-kilometer run along the dike, which was pretty rugged. And they'll you drop you off there, you get to the end of it, and then you get into the trucks if you're lucky and get back to Nkoma. If you're not lucky, you walk back. And I must say the guys did well. Most of the guys that came in were very, very, they had all the spirit, all the energy. I know we had the chairman of GM of breweries. He was a friend of mine. I won't mention his name because I can't remember it actually. But he was a big guy. He enjoyed his beer. And I thought, this guy, you're not going to make it. Tell you what, he did that whole course. Unbelievable.
It amazes me that there was this in-house training that some units did. I always picture that training happened at Llewellyn or School of Infantry or Tomlinson Depot or whatever. But the more I've done these interviews, I realize that guys were trained all over the place.
Yeah, on call-up, we normally had a week battle camp, refresher, and then you were sent off. With Bob, for example, on a 6-week course, well, you do jungle lane the whole lot. The interesting thing about jungle lane, it's always, and I did the same thing myself. Our first jungle lane, obviously you're all very nervous, and you're walking in patrol position, and the instructor behind you, he puts 2 shots on the ground behind you, and the first thing you do is turn around and put 2 shots in the air. And I'm surprised he never got killed. But and then, of course, the amusing part was always the log across the river with a bit of plastic underneath. As the guy got there, plastic goes off, and boom, guy's thrown off the log. And then, of course, We had one instructor there, very, very good, one of the top instructors, Williamson. He was very, very kind, but some of the guys that came in were very fragile, you know. And this one guy, practicing on the training on the hand grenade. I'll never forget this incident where Williamson took the guy, actually walked him through, literally through jungle land, got to the end and said, "Now, here's the grenade, pull the pin, not with your teeth, obviously, and throw it." And the guy throws it and hits the branch. And it bounces back behind them. So Williamson grabs this guy, takes him into the sandbags, and picks the gun. And Williamson got a bit of shrapnel in his arse. Obviously, that guy was never deployed.
Yeah.
So, you know, the guys were well trained. There's no question about it. And Bob Lyons used to emphasize this: you're not there to be a hero. You're there to do a job, be careful, get home, and overcome the fear. He said, if you're not scared, something wrong with you. That you've got to control that fear, which I think we've all been through. I think some of the worst patrols I did were up at the keeps, because the terrorists just had free run there. I mean, they were obviously they're a bad idea. That's the reality. I think PSYOPs were involved with that idea as well. Really, it was a terrible idea. Just the relocation, the building the camps, and then those guard force guys had a terrible time. Very bad time.
For our excuse me, for our foreign viewers, these keeps were sort of used in Vietnam as well, where locals were moved into centralized protection points, and they could go out during the day to plow their lands and look after the animals, but at night they were put back in these keeps, which might have been 5 kilometers square, 10 kilometers square, all fenced in and guarded by a crew called Guard Force. So that was the idea, to take the counterinsurgency terrorists swim through the river of people. If you can denude them of the people that supply them, it makes it harder for them. So that was the idea behind it.
Yeah, but the reality is that the terrorists just got in. The guys in the Guard Force used to stay in their fort and get stomped regularly. And on the one patrol I had there, which was a bit of a firefight, one of the guys with me, one of the riflemen, that was in 79. I never knew him before, never met him before. That was also the bad thing now. All the guys you knew, you went on patrol and always knew. He got fortunately, a trace around, just snipped his skin across his stomach there. And I thought, hello, now how do I deal with this? We didn't get any medical training as such, but we had the drip, put the drip into him. Eventually, it's like putting a needle in a snake. Eventually got the drip in because he had shock, and then put the morphine in. Interestingly, though, and I spoke to a doctor about this afterwards, not a medical, a doctor, a tracer had actually cauterized. Otherwise, we could have bled to death. All we did is we just put the packs on and then called in the Casualty. The other thing that we did experience, which I think is common knowledge, the terrorists were using people from the keep as shields. That actually walked, we could actually see them, and we couldn't do anything.
And that was all while you were in PSYOPs, or you had left PSYOPs?
What happened that we were all absorbed into 5th Bat.
Right.
So PSYOPs just became a distant memory. It was a waste of manpower, quite frankly. So I just sort of moved into 5RR. And nobody said anything, did anything. That's what I did. And so I was in 5RR basically from 75 right through to 1980. The last call up was 1980. They called me up to do some training at Tacoma with some of the new army. That was quite interesting. Bob gave him a hell of a hard time. But just people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was 6 weeks, and then you also knew about the episode there where there was going to be, what do they call those camps?
Peas.
Yeah, the assembly points.
Assembly points, yeah.
We were called up, and I was sent to Corner Park Lane on the Enterprise Road there. I had a converted Bren with the FN 762 on the magazine on the top. Nice weapon, actually.
Mm.
And 4 other guys I'd never seen in my life. Didn't even know if they could shoot.
Jeez.
And we was told there, okay, position there. And if you see when you get the word and you see any of these people walking around, take them out. Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Really, and then we got a call on the radio, go home. So we went home.
Everything was fracturing at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, we lived on Enterprise Road there, in what we called River House. 1979, while I was on call up, a guy came and knocked on the door, and my wife answered the door, glass door we had, and she told me afterwards, a guy with a beard and AK. My son recognized the AK, and he was obviously a Salute Scout, and he just wanted to use the phone. We didn't have a phone at the time, so my wife directed him to the neighbor. And then, as we discovered later, that the terrorists were actually in servants' quarters throughout Enterprise area there, that up Enterprise and that.
Mm.
So things were very, very tight.
Mm.
My brother was in armored cars at the time.
Mm.
And he was up in Chipinga, I think. Chipinga, yeah. And he could look across and see tanks. And he phoned me and he said, Hudson, it's over. It's over. It's just... So it was quite a disappointing time, letdown time,
It was very scary. It was very tumultuous. I'd left the army. I was an instructor in Part 2 at that stage, and you just saw everything falling apart around you. All those guys guarding the streets, and it was really nerve-wracking. And we all knew it was coming to an end, and it was terrifying for a lot of people. But
we were sort of helpless,
Yeah. Absolutely helpless. Everything was so disjointed. I mean, I was with a rapid reaction force out in Hatfield or something like that, and when we got the election results that Mugabe had won, which we got before the general population, I remember 2 guys in the ops room literally picked up their FNs, threw them out the window with their ammo packs and everything, and just got in their cars and drove away. It was disjointed. It was very frightening, actually.
Yeah, on that election, I was posted to Rosawi, I remember. And the intimidation was so obviously obvious.
Mm.
People, I understood a bit of Shona. I listened to these guys. The terrorists are there in the line, in the firing line.
Mm.
They were being told, you vote for Mugabe, otherwise you ain't seen nothing yet. Basically, it was a message.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was no chance, and we could do nothing. We were helpless.
And the locals sniffed the change coming, and I remember taking my wife home to where we lived in Maybelline. She worked in Manika Road, and we were in the car chugging along home, and we came through a group of about 300 locals, all singing and chanting, and we tried to maneuver our way through them, and they were banging the bonnet, and
scary.
It was scary as hell because I had a weapon, but what do? You kill 5 of them, and the rest murder you.
Mobbed.
Yeah, it was frightening. But you mentioned before we came online that you had some interactions with special forces and that type of thing. Have you got any stories from that?
Not really. When I say interaction, I knew several of the guys, some TF guys like Rob Crowcamp, and then his brother was also SAS. I think, was he SAS? Yeah,
Scouts. Dennis Crewcamp.
Yeah. So I knew them well. So I didn't actually work with them. But I used to. Rob had a gold mine, and I used to consult for him on the mine.
Did they ever sit down over a whiskey by a fire or a braai or something and regale you of some of their stories and experiences?
Yes, Rob told me one story where they were on patrol, and there were just those thin mapani trees, and they came under fire, and the one guy went down behind, not shot, hid behind the mapani tree, and Rob jumped on top of him. Hands over his head, and the fire was coming and ripping through the don't forget now, these guys had learned to shoot.
Yeah, they got much better towards the end.
Yeah, so it wasn't just on automatic, it was they would actually aim and shoot. And he said that was terrifying. He didn't know what to do. There was nowhere to go. And he said eventually they got tired, ran out of ammo, and it all went quiet. And he said he paired around. But no, they didn't talk much about the experiences. One RLI guy was at Chimoy. He worked for me, actually. I won't mention his name. He has been asked to do an interview, but he doesn't want to. And he told me the experience. It was very much has been described. Very, very nice youngster. He's now working in South Africa, got his own business, doing very well. Very, very competent guy.
This is what amazes me, how well our people, male and female, have established themselves in other countries, because we learned so much in our country, and our educational system was proactive, it was disciplined. We learned wonderful things in the military, how to lead, how to face terrible situations and deal with them. And I was amazed at a school reunion, what incredible jobs and occupations some of my classmates had. One guy owned an airline, another guy was a brain surgeon, someone had shares in a Fortune 500 company. Just remarkable, because there was something, the work ethic maybe was in demand. I don't know.
Very, very much so. It's hard to describe between knew each other, even though we didn't know each other. I used to do quite a bit with golf with Ginger, what's his name? Ginger Hoffpenny on Golf World, and Tim Price and Nick Price.
Oh, right.
Great. We all knew each other. Nick tried to teach me to play golf. He failed dismally. Well, I failed him, I should say.
Yeah.
And I must talk about another beautiful planning mess was the Op Turkey. Did you ever hear about that?
No.
Okay, this was an exercise in about 1976 where they rationed mini meal. So a family could only buy 5 kgs a week. The idea was to starve the terrorists, and he said, this is not going to work. And it tied up manpower on roadblocks. And can you imagine the resentment? Because the terrorists would take what little they had anyway. And then the resentment at the roadblocks, confiscating mini meal. Can you believe it?
Terrible. That's a really stupid move.
And it's well documented. And I was, we were not children. We were mature men, and businessmen, we could see the stupidity of these things. And if you voiced your concern, it was of no consequence.
So on the one hand, we were trying to win their hearts and minds, and on the other hand, we were grabbing them by the balls and starving them.
Yes, and causing huge resentment.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, can you imagine you want to feed your family and your mini meal is taken away?
Terrible. Stupid idea. Good Lord.
And it was nationwide. Anyway, it eventually just collapsed on its own, obviously. Okay, so now on one clandestine op, that's also a laugh, actually, because these RMs are now going through the tribal trust land, and you've got to debus while it's moving. So the tailgate gets dropped down, and it's got those moon-shaped steps. And of course, Chalmers gets his foot jammed in there, snap, dragged along.
Ow.
Yelling, of course, I was yelling. So the whole operation was compromised anyway. And eventually they stopped and took me and put my leg in plaster. And I was put in a hyena and driven home to Helen. And Helen, at midnight, of course, they're very subtle, these guys, and dropped me off at my house at midnight. So Helen, of course, thinks, oh, this is bad news. But I come out there with leg and plaster. So I thought, oh, well, I'll have a relief from the army, and not a chance. Called up, guard duty, KG6.
Good Lord.
So I report for duty there, and the hygienic conditions were not great in the guardhouse there, I can assure you. So now you've got to sleep there, do everything there. Can't go home, and home is just around the corner, although we did sneak out every now and again. And then Friday nights and Saturday nights were party time, KG6. This shocked me. And I don't care who I offend, I was shocked. Some very pretty ladies always used to pitch up in taxis at the gate on the Friday and Saturday evening, and we were told to let them in, which we did. We obeyed orders, obviously. And then I remember this one particular guy who I knew very well. I knew his family and his wife. Pitches up with one of these girls in his car and he's a captain. Yeah, he's a captain, I think. Didn't really matter. Still an idiot. And he demanded that I lift the boom. He didn't recognize me, but no, I recognized him. So I went up to him and I said, license please, sir, and ID card. And he was very rude to me, but I kept my cool. And I said, sir, I cannot let you out unless you furnish those documents. I'm following protocol. So he grudgingly gives it to me. And, I said, I know you. Recognize me. And anyway, I gave him a bit of a hard time, and he told me he's going to get me. And I said, yeah, sure. I've got 2 weeks to go. Yeah, you got the time to get me. I said, but I'll have your balls when I get out.
Excellent.
And he did a wheelie and took off.
That was a very sad aspect of our war, of infidelity from both male and female. I think it was the stress, the needing of physical comfort, or just getting rid of worries, or just knowing that somebody can talk to you. It was fairly rife, actually, when you think about it.
It was very rife, unfortunately. So lots of marriages break up, and friends of mine.
Plenty.
So very sad. A lot of the ladies couldn't take the stress when their husbands were on call up. Fortunately, Helen did very well. She ran the business and dealt with the children, as did many, many Rhodesian wives. And they really need an accolade, because
I really admire them, and I'm longing to interview them. I keep announcing this on this program, but I don't get any response. I think I might have one lady coming up who went through absolute hell on the farms. And you've got to admire somebody like that when they haven't got any male support. They've got kids, maybe. They've got terrorists shooting them, landmines in the road. Good Lord.
Daily stress. Going back on that, at Mount Thackeray, there's a farm there where now I was on an OP there, as I said, but I also surveyed the road up there to build the station. And on the way there, I was in my Land Rover with my survey kit and a couple of guys, and I was taking the daughter to visit her family. She was a nurse. And we were on convoy, and I was behind a RL with SAP guys in it at that time. And in front there was a RLI, fortunate for us. And then there's that, as you're coming into Mount Darwin, I don't know if you remember, there's that quite a steep hill in the mountain on the side. I can't exactly remember where, and that's where, not far from Mount Darwin itself, actually, which was surprising. And that's where the ambush took place, from the left-hand side of the road. Okay, so the RLI, both trucks stopped, and obviously I stopped. And I stopped because the SAP truck hit a landmine on the back left hand, and I can still see that in slow motion, the wheel going up in the air and the dirt, and the truck lifting up, and the guys being thrown out of the truck, landing on the ground and getting up and shouting, "Waar is my geweer? My geweer is los." And I had the young lady underneath the Land Rover, was my guy. It's my 3006, shooting at I don't know what, but I was shooting in that direction. I think there was some effect, but those SAP guys were really traumatized, let me tell you, and dislocated arms, legs. Fortunately, the RLI were there, and they went and they overran the position and killed the guys. So that was quite exciting.
And I'm amazed how many troopers never ever put seatbelts on. I mean, it was just amazing. Death waiting to happen. I was involved in evacuating a guy who'd already hit a mine in a ferret armored car, and we put him on the truck right at the back of the convoy to take him back to the hospital. And we turned around, and even though that was at the back of the convoy coming to get us, rescue us, we hit a mine. And I don't think his seatbelt was properly done up, or he didn't do it up at all. I don't know who put him in that seat, but out of the corner of my eye, he had bandages on his head from when he'd hit the overhead metal in the armored car. I just saw this white bandage thing go up in the air there like that, because the mine went right under him, the right front on a 2-5. And he landed in a thorn bush about 12, 15 feet away. And I just thought, stupid, but any bugger who went on a truck without pulling on a seatbelt was stupid.
Not to mention secondary missiles, Coke bottles and beer crates in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
The tragedy I'm seeing, on the obituaries that come through on the various websites, the number of guys that were killed in road accidents, truck accidents, and ADs is just scary.
Yeah.
Scary. I mean, and that's a tragedy. And then 1976, 77, 78, 79, the number of people killed were...
It was escalating. It was unsustainable for such a small population. I mean, we were having over 1,000 men emigrate every month, so that was a battalion of men we lost every month. Yeah, it was scary times from 78 till independence.
79, we were being called up 6 weeks, 2 weeks out. 6 weeks back in again.
Yeah, that's pressure for anybody.
And when did you leave, Tony?
Left the country entirely. Gee, that's a good question. End of 1980. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I came back in 1985 and started a construction company, which was extremely successful. I ended up employing 400 men. But
what was it called?
Bryson, Bryson Construction.
In Harare.
In Harare, yes. We got a lot of really good contracts with Mali Tiles. We put up a housing estate with them. We built a hospital along the road there with about 20 subsidiary housing units and many other things, warehouses. My brother was a civil engineer, so he was the guiding force. He taught me.
Who was he with?
Pardon?
What company was he with as a civil engineer?
He was with Professor Rolf trained him, and then crumbs.
Oh, no, not serious. Just interesting because I did a lot of work with Indian Co as well.
Yeah. He worked mainly in Gwelo or Gatuna or someplace where they were putting up all the ginneries and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah, the cotton stuff. Yeah.
He built a lot of that. So whichever company did that that's where he was. But he had a hut full of that, and we started our own business and became very successful very quickly.
Well, it was a boom time then, eh?
It was indeed. It was a wonderful time. And I think if things had not gone bad from that point, I'd be a very comfortable man in a beautiful home, and we would all still be there. But,
Absolutely.
We can cry into our teacup as long as we like. Going back, you mentioned before we came online that you were doing a road survey and you were dropping supplies and you had a Bell helicopter with you or something. What was that all about?
Oh, okay. I was doing the Hanyani Gorge. There was an irrigation scheme they were putting up there during the war. It was 1974. And I got the contract to do the ground control for the aerial survey. So it was a pretty strenuous bit of ground there, as you know, the Kachuta Trail on the east side of the gorge. So there's Mushumbi Pools, there's a little township there, and then Mushungayandi Pools is actually right at the base of the escarpment. Beautiful pool there, you can see the hippos, fish, bream, and really lovely. And then, so I hired a Bell helicopter to do food drops. I had these, what do they call these skins, plastic skins full of water.
Bladders.
Hanyani water a lot of the time.
Bladder, yeah.
Etc. So I dropped those off with food packs at strategic places and cement where we had to build beacons. And then I hired bearers from Chief Tsungu, who was a real scary old fellow. Drank a lot of beer, my beer. And we'd start a run into start the survey. I had a Part 2 guy, Dieter Laniger, very nice guy, very competent guy, and the WO2. And as our first sortie into the gorge, we were fired upon, ambushed. And he told us to get down. I, of course, had my head right down. The bearers all took off at a high rate of knots. And the WO2, he went around behind the ambush position, held him up. It was the SAP guys. They were 10 kilometers out of position. We used to get onto the jock every morning or before a sortie and find out where the ambush positions were. So they were quite embarrassed. And I had to change my underpants.
Hello, Connie Unglespraat. I think they didn't read the maps very well.
They were sort of chucked into the bush.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
Terrible. But, good guys. And then, so it was a tough job. And I used to talk, when we got to the first food drop, we were quite relieved to get there. We thought, a nice meal, fresh water. The water bags had been cut and all the tins of food had been taken with a note there from a guy called Hudson.
Oh, the bastard, really?
Yep, Hudson. And he said, don't worry, you're doing a job here that's going to be good for the people. So anyway, I reported that through radio with my wife through to Jock Snoy, I think it was. No, can't remember. Mount Darwin. Whatever it was. So we reported it, and they came and did a follow. They never found the guy, but he never touched us. But he took all our food, all the food drops. So then we had to backpack all our stuff in, and that was tough. And then the rain started coming. And so I don't know what to do now. I need to finish the job because I need the money and I don't want to come back there. And so I had this SSB radio. I got hold of Helen. Jokingly, I said, I wish I had a helicopter. Just get onto RA, Rhodesian Air Force, and ask them if I can borrow 2 choppers. So she did. She phoned the Rhodesian Air Force, and next day 2 Alouettes arrived. Where else could that happen?
Good Lord.
And they took me onto the various points. We did the observations with our electronic equipment. Job was finished, and gave them a couple of crates of beer, and off they went. That's the community we have. That's the reality.
That was the spirit of the Rhodesian people. I'm not
Can
saying
you imagine that happening anywhere else.
I wouldn't. It's just fantastic. It was the spirit to core, whatever you call it, was just beautiful.
On that job as well. Now the rivers are running. So now we had to get 2 Land Rovers across. Dieter Leininger took his Land Rover and he said, okay, we put a tarpaulin down. Now I've been mocked about this so many times, but there's actually a film of the RLI doing exactly that. So he gets the guys with the tarpaulin, the labourers, holds the and he drives his Land Rover on. I said, you first. And they hold the Land Rover, take it across, drives it off. So when I relate the story, when I get back home, that's a lot of bullshit, Chalmers. I said, okay, but it happened. There it is. And I was redeemed by the RLI doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, the volume of water displaced is far heavier than the weights of the jeep, so it could float.
Well, you made a boat out of the tarpaulin, you see.
Yeah, that's the principle, displacement of water.
So that was interesting.
Yeah. Now that I'm 69, but my brain's probably about 85. I've just thought of who my brother worked for. It was Wade Adams.
Yes.
And he built the cell towers between Harare and Kariba, all the way up Sonoya, right up to Kariba. He did right at the top of the heights.
Wade Adams, I did a lot of work for them and in South Africa as well.
Interesting. So that's what he did. I think it took him 2 years to build those towers, and he was the principal engineer on the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, it must have been a fascinating job, man.
It was. I often met him somewhere near Karoi, and we would have a braai together, and he met a lot of farmers along the way who befriended him, and he's been friends with them ever since. And it was a wonderful experience. I remember that.
Yeah, so we've had an adventurous life, all of us, I think. And,
yeah.
And a life to be envied in many respects. Huh?
Yes. And I think that's why it's so hard to let go of it and adapt. But we've got to try and look forward somehow, as difficult as it is, and just do the best we can. And I think
you're still working? I'm working.
No, I retired about 3 years ago. I had some operations that made it difficult for me to sort of carry on working, and I took early retirement. And I struggled along driving vehicles, actually, until I got my pensionable age, and then I jacked it in, and my wife jacked it in as well. So we've been pensioned since we were 66. Yeah.
Oh, well, all our pension was lost from Zimbabwe. So my wife and I Helen's turned 80 and I 80 in September. Still going strong.
Fantastic. I remember all the hundreds of thousands of dollars I paid into that the scheme that the Zimbabwean government came up there, from the chicken building there, the Shake Shack building. They made us pay into retirement or whatever they called it for our workers.
I called it the ATM.
Yeah, I must have written out checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and not one of them ever sought back, including myself. I had to contribute to my own.
I the same thing. I didn't get any of the pension. The mining industry pension fund was destroyed. The workman compensation fund was destroyed.
I think that's one of the biggest areas of resentment towards the British government of the day, is that they did not underwrite our pensions. It's resulted in a very bitter taste among many of us.
Yeah, well, they didn't underwrite anything.
No, it was smash and grab, and they were on the side of the grabbers.
Yeah.
But anyway,
And then I say 1985 was good. I was consulting, if we still got time, consulting Australian company, Canadian company, built 2 mines and then opened another mine in Bulawayo. So yeah, it was good. But then, of course, they kicked us off that eventually.
There was one. I watched your video clip before I started interviewing you, and I think that episode with the lions is worth repeating. I love stories of animals because our foreign viewers can't comprehend what we dealt with the animal world as well. Would you like to repeat that story here? Yeah,
I was working for a firm of land surveyors. In fact, his son is down here, and John knows him very well. I'm just trying to remember his name, sorry. I'll get it. Anyway, I was doing a photo control survey in the Decca area for the blanket photography. Really beautiful area. I was doing the identification, and I was about 15 km from the truck right on the edge of the Decca River. And I'd chosen a nice big Chiduli anthill there as a point that I could identify on the 25,000 photography. And I'd measured the point, and I looked to the front staff, and I saw it dropping with nobody holding it. Heard the one behind me clatter. I turned around, and the lioness had come to. She was literally 3 meters away, and I saw this mouth and this noise. I'll never forget it. Still hear it. And there was a mapani tree. Now, fortunately, the mapani trees in that area very slim. That might sound bad, but I shot at that thing like you have no idea. Despite all the so-called advice, do not run. Well, I was up that mapani tree.
I bet you couldn't have inserted a pencil in your ear at that point either.
It was jet propelled, I promise you. And I remember I had a leather jacket on as well. It's quite chilly, which saved me a few scratches. Then the guys 5 of the guys all run and climbed up trees as well. And she went and got on top of the Chiduli, which was sort of eye level to me, and I could see her crouched. In fact, Helen's made a picture painting of it. Crouched like this, gauging whether she could get to me. So I climbed higher. Being a surveyor, I could work out the... And so we were up the tree for about an hour. It was quite tough hanging onto that tree. She came around and tried to pull herself up. That was scary. But lioness can't do that. They need a branch to get up on, fortunately. And she circled the tree, went back around the anthill. I said to the guys, right, let's get down, guys. It's about another half an hour. They said, you first. So I started going down, and she charged the tree again. Whoa, got higher.
That's frightening.
It was, the lioness is not tiny. And anyway, it's dark. The one guy lit his hat, chucked it down to, it's got that white dry grass, didn't catch a light. So eventually I said, okay, well, it's now or never, we've got to go. So I got down. They all got down. The one guy, we had to knock steel pegs into the baobab tree. He'd run up a baobab tree. This is absolutely no lie. Got him down, and I said to the guys, now listen, stay in a bunch. Don't run if she comes back. So we're all walking, looking warily, and I guarantee if she had come back, we'd all taken off. So I got back to the truck, and I was very ragged, full of bark and scratches, and first thing I wanted was a beer. So I went into the Baobab pub there. Everybody turned around and says, "What the F has happened to you, Chalmers? You look like you've been dragged through the bush." I said, "I have. I've been chased up a tree by a lioness." And they all pissed themselves, of course. But I never bought a beer for the next 2 weeks.
Excellent.
I related the story. And then the worst thing was I phoned Helen the next day, on the old Bakelite phones.
Yeah.
I said to her, well, I didn't want to phone you last night. Didn't want to frighten you, but yesterday we were chased up a tree by a lioness. She drops the phone. So I said, the poor girl's died of shock. She's laughing her head off. But she had this vision, she's a cartoonist as well, of all of us climbing up this one tree like a bunch of hillbillies. And I wish I could remember the name of the land surveyor. Ask John, he'll remember him.
Yeah,
He was in the Air Force as well, by the way.
He'll insert it here with the little name, I'm sure, if he remembers. I've just finished interviewing Greg Ashton for his 8th interview.
I saw that.
Yeah, and that was in the national parks, and he went for a road run with all of his buddies who were pretending to be national parks guys. They ran along unarmed, not a wise thing to do in the national parks of South Africa of the day. And on the way back, he noticed that there were these huge lion paws all over the dirt track, and they were actually being stalked by a pride of lions. And from that day onwards, the only weapon that the government would give them was a sawn-off shotgun, handheld little thing, which would just bounce off the nose of a lion. Stupid.
Yeah, you know how high a lion's head is.
Yeah.
I mean, they're enormous.
They're frightening. The closest I've been to a lion was halfway between Salisbury or Harare and Umtali. There was that place on the right-hand side where you could stop and fill your car up with some juice and go in there and have a meal. At the back, they had a little enclosure where they had a lion in there.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, a male. And when I went and stood at the fence, he came right up to the fence and just sitting on his paws. I think his head was up here somewhere.
Yeah.
And the mane and the size of his paws and those yellow eyes, boy, were they focused. And you could see his brain saying, "How can I kill you? How can I get you?" And I got the shivers up my spine, and I walked away slowly and then very rapidly and ran like hell back into to get a Coke, But they're frightening animals.
Yeah, and a number of the guys who were taken there was at training camp in Kariba.
Yeah, good Lord.
Then I don't know if you remember Len Harvey. He was killed by a lion in the he was a game ranger. Him and his wife was mauled.
Wow.
And one of SAS guy, Helen, who was that guy, Drewer? That with the lion? Sorry, getting old. Anyway, he lived next to us in Rua. He was SAS. I'll let you know his name. I'm sure John will know his name. And his face was torn off, and his son had his fingers shot off. And it was a terrible experience. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll send it to you, the link.
In my platoon, a guy called Eddie smelled something really stinky behind him, turned around, and a hyena bit him in the face. Now, the jaws of a hyena, their closing pressure is enough for their teeth to go through a shovel. So he had a really badly mauled face and had to get plastic surgery. The other one was a really gungy guy. His nickname was Boots, because if he took off his boots in the barracks, everybody would leave. And he was taken by a croc, and this thing, he stuck his fingers in its eyes, and he managed to swim back to shore. As he got to shore, got pulled back in again, and eventually he got away from the croc and ended up with 132 stitches. But the joke that went round was that the croc spat him out because he was such a gungy figure.
Tragic. Those crocs, people are very blasé about them. My nephew was taken by a croc at one of the camps there, fishing camps. He was just fishing. His hook got tied up and he stepped forward like this, and this 18-foot cam took him. And his brother and cousin jumped on the croc, tried to do the eye gouging, didn't know, and took him down, and he was dead.
Good Lord, I'm sorry to hear that.
And my brother-in-law the next day was there, obviously very distraught, and people were swimming there, and he said, "You know what? My son was killed here yesterday, and you're swimming, and they knew about it." And
terrible. That's a personal tragedy, eh?
a South African ranger, a South African guy, had a weapon, and he saw the croc and shot it actually. And then he got into trouble with national parks. Can you believe?
No, well, you've got to kill it once it's had a taste of human flesh. On a closing note, the funniest thing I ever saw, well, strange, right on the other side of Kariba, where Sanyati Gorge is, there was a reedy bit over to the northwest or whatever, and this African woman was up here in reedy water fishing, and there were crocs. And so my mate who was driving the boat could speak the language fluently, and he said to her, "Hey, mother, aren't you worried about crocodiles?" And she said, "No, you win some or you lose some." And she just flicked her line back in the water.
It's that fatalistic attitude, actually, which was endemic in the mining industry, which is very dangerous, by the way.
Yeah. Africa, I love it.
No.
Hudson, it's been a very interesting talk. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm sure our audience will as well. And as I usually do at the end of every talk, I want to encourage people to come forward and talk and put our memories into recorded fashion, just like the old boys from World War II in Vietnam and Korea have all done that. We need to do this. We need to keep our history preserved. So please come forward and volunteer or talk. Hudson, thank you very much. And thank you very much for coming forward with your talk.